morning, and I stand in front of you in place of Dr. Sudeep Gupta, who our director TMC, who is unwell. And I have the great pleasure of introducing to you Dr. Arun Kumar Nayak, who has an illustrious history of doing phenomenal things in nuclear power plants and nuclear power research. What I gleaned out of whatever was sent to me is that here is a PhD doctor in nuclear physics who has had varied experience in various cultures. He has been in Japan for quite some time, from there Netherlands, then Germany. Have I missed out on something? And then, of course, India. What is amazing is that earlier in life, that's my take on this, if you've been exposed to what you do here, how is it done in other parts of the world, that's a great area of friction where you find that things are done very differently there. And the results may not be as good or they may be better. So you have a possibility of comparing what methodologies used there, are they good or not. And I find that I'm sure Dr. Nayak has been an expert and he has reached these levels entirely because of that. And he has been actively involved with HBNI for teaching and guiding MTech and PhD students. He served as an associate editor of ASME, Journal of Nuclear Engineering and Radiation Science, and he is a recipient of several awards. He has written 9 books and published more than 500 research papers. He is the head of Nuclear Controls and Planning Wing, Department of Atomic Energy, and he's a fellow of National Academy of Engineering and Maharashtra Academy of Sciences. He will give us some insights as to why people have so much of aversion towards radiation, and is that ill-founded or there is some data for that. Great pleasure to have you here, Dr. Nayak, and the platform is yours. Please come. Pointer, right, left, front.
Namaskar and very good morning. First of all, let me thank Professor Badwe for introducing me to this august audience full of doctors, high-quality doctors, internationally well-known. And also let me thank Dr. Gupta, who is not here, Director TMC, for inviting me to give this talk. Well, there is a brief history. I'm not a radiation experts like you. All of you are working in the field of radiation. Almost your life you give to understand radiation, its implications, especially looking at cancer cure. And what I have looked at here in a different perspective. Why? There is a brief history behind why did I write. There is a book on this. I think my colleagues have brought nearly 100 books to distribute here. The rationale for writing that book and telling the story here is a little different. In fact, if you look at India, we are very ambitiously growing, and we are ambitioned to be one of the richest nations by 2047, $35 trillion economy by mid of this century. And when I look at our so much GDP growth, which is ambitioned, the energy growth has to support it, otherwise it is not going to happen. And today, 90% of the energy comes from burning coal, oil, and gas, and which is the root cause of the global warming. And then there is a I'll say third process. Instead of burning this, let's look at renewables. But renewables is what nature gives us. We cannot create renewable. And the potential of renewables in India, what we can get maximum, is hardly 40% of the today's total energy consumption. What about today's remaining 60%? And if we have to be a $35 trillion economy, today we are hardly 3.7 or $4 trillion economy. So 9-10 times we have to grow. So energy has to grow at least 6-7 times of today's total energy consumption. The huge nuclear business has to happen if we have to support a $35 trillion economy in the next 2 to 3 decades. Huge. I will say that every district in India should have a couple of nuclear power plants. When I was moving with this ambition, one of our former chairman, Dr. R.K. Sinhaji, he cautioned me with this fear of radiation with public. It is impregnated in the mind of the public. And it's not only the doctors here who are sitting here. If I ask a common man, are you in favor of nuclear? He would say, sorry, no, I need any other energy sources except nuclear. Why? Because it gives radiation, and radiation can cause cancer and death, so I don't need it, correct? And if you get cancer, what do you do? Like take radiation. Then if you take radiation, why do you feel that you will get cancer? Who told all this thing? Is there science behind this? So this is what is the biggest question today. Then Dr. Sinha gave me a book. All of you can read it. It's a small book. It's called, the title is Radiation and Regions. I was going from Bombay to Bhubaneswar in a flight. Same day morning he gave the book in Air India flight, 2 hours flight. I read that book from first page to last page. I said, what is that? Why people are scared of radiation? And the story was completely different. So that was my starting point. And then I started digging in literature what radiation really has caused and who created this phobia in the mind. Is there a science, or there is myth, or there is politics, or there is something which has been fragmented and put in the mind of the public? That is what we are going to say today. So let me tell you, okay. So first of all, let me tell you, what I am going to present here is from open literature. 400 journal papers, roughly, I have referred, and 2 books. The essence here is from open literature. Nowhere I have tried to put my own statement so that public never feels a nuclear scientist is trying to create something biased. So all that I'm going to speak here is totally my own unbiased statement. I've tried to remain neutral. So briefly, for a common man, all of you I know are very experts. Radiation, there is nothing new to discover. We all are exposed to radiation. It's a constant companion in our life. Whether we live in the house, outside, anywhere, it's part and parcel of us. There is a difference between ionizing radiation and radiation. There is some difference. Of course, ionizing radiation is also radiation. It's only differ what you mean by the frequency and wavelength. When we say long wavelength and lower frequency, such as heat, we say, they offer less energy than short wavelength and high frequency radiation. like X and gamma rays. This high frequency portion of the electromagnetic spectrum is known as the ionizing radiation. How radiation is measured? It's measured by a unit called sievert, we all know. And what is sievert? Sievert is nothing but the energy deposited of 1 joule of radiation energy in 1 kg of human tissue. So we all know sievert is a very big unit. We have to speak in terms of millisievert or microsievert. That means 1,000 of a sievert or 10 raised to 6 times divided by that, 10 raised to minus 6 times is called the microsievert. So little bit let's know how the discovery of ionizing radiation took place. Significantly developed in 19th century, Mendeleev, we know, he introduced the periodic table in 1869. Röntgen accidentally discovered X-rays when he captured X-ray image of his wife's hand. And this led to further discoveries in the properties of ionizing radiation and the possibility of using radiation in medicine. In 1896, Henry Becquerel announced the discovery of radioactivity. 2 years later, 1898, Marie Curie and Pierre Curie in Paris, they reported the discovery of new element which they called as polonium. The term radioactive appeared in a scientific paper for the first time, and uranic rays were renamed as Becquerel rays. Rutherford classified the new rays as alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Now going back to discovery of fission and its consequences. This is where the story started. And we all know the history. Enrico Fermi was the first to demonstrate the existence of radioactive element or radioisotopes produced by neutron radiation. 1938, 3 radiochemists, Meitner, Hahn, and Fred Strassmann, they were the first to discover nuclear fission. And the critical thing happened 4 years down the line. Fermi and his colleagues, they demonstrated the first self-sustaining nuclear fission chain reaction at the University of Chicago. So this is well known as Chicago pile. And until now, it is widely regarded as the most important scientific event that led to all that is we are talking today. What was the outcome of that? The Second World War was happening, and the United States immediately decided to develop the nuclear weapons, because once the self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction was demonstrated in Chicago 5. So Professor Oppenheimer, we all know, if you have seen the movie Oppenheimer, he is the wartime head of Los Alamos Laboratory. The Manhattan Project started, and the whole objective was to develop the atom bomb, and today also he is known as the father of atom bomb. So 2 atom bombs, were dropped. The first was Little Boy, which was dropped in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and 3 days later, August 9, another atom bomb known as Fat Man was dropped in Nagasaki. What happened? There's some lag. Yeah. What happened after the 2 bombs were dropped? We all know the atom bombs caused loss of many lives. About 200,000 people died instantaneously. Nobody knew until now how these people died. Why? Because there was no radiation measuring devices. Nobody knew until now how these 200,000 people died. But the survivor data that was used to understand what is the effect of radiation on human health. In fact, until now, worldwide, there is not a single scientific paper you'll find if radiation doses versus human health. Not a single paper, because there is no scientific study ever has been conducted. So the issue was that there was no radiation devices, 200,000 people died. There were, of course, plenty of survivor data. So statistical investigation was only made based on which so many correlations happened. I'll speak out what was the outcome of that. So extensive studies were carried out by Radiation Effects Research Foundation, called RERF, and Atom Bomb Casualty Commission on dosimetry. As you know, the dose received by the survivors were from very small, infinitesimal small, to very lethal. Lethal means heavy doses also they received. And many scientists in Japan and US worked almost 60 years to develop the dosimetry system. In America, there is a desert called the Nevada Desert. In the United States, they carry out all weapon tests in this desert. And what they did in America, they simulated those bombs which was dropped in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, in this desert, and tried to map the dose at different distances. The issue was there was no radiation measuring devices in those days. The earliest dosimetry system, tentative 1957 dosimetry, called T57D, was developed in 1950s. In 60s, there was some improvement to that, and the latter dosimetry system, DS86, was developed in 1986, and that was based on the best contemporary understanding of the source term, radiation transport, shielding, and using the latest computational methods. But in 2003, only the DS02 system was developed, and which was approved and implemented to study the atomic bomb survivors based on the Radiation Effects Research Foundation data. As I said, 200,000 people died instantaneously. How did they die? Later on, this analysis was made. What does an atom bomb contain? Most important. 35% of the energy of an atom bomb contains heat and light. Same as any other explosives. 35% comes heat and light. 50% is blast energy, pressure waves. Only 15% is nuclear radiation. Please understand. Only 15% of atom bomb contains nuclear radiation, out of which 5% is prompt, 10% is delayed because of the decay of the fissile products. So it might have so happened that all these 200,000 people died not because radiation, but like any other explosives. So this is a beautiful study, the analysis of the atom bomb radiation effects data in Japan. Several thousand people were taken to study what is the implication of the dose to the deaths due to cancer. Beautiful investigations has been done. I have put in the red mark, if you see in that boxes. Those people who received the doses less than 200 millisievert, please remember this number, 200 millisievert, what was found? The risk was found close to zero or even negative or very, very slightly positive, up to 200 millisievert. In the sense, their extra risk due to death, due to cancer, was in many cases negative in the sense their I would say longevity was higher, and their probability of getting cancer and death was lesser as compared to an unexposed Japanese person is up to 200 millisievert. Of course, people who received higher doses, they died. They had a much bigger risk of death due to cancers, both due to leukemia and solid cancers. Low dose radiation from atom bombs, it was found, I said 200 millisievert, that has extended the survivor lifespan of Japanese. Very important. Today, why most of Japanese people live longer, possibly is that they are exposed to small dose of radiation. Of course, atom bomb survivors who received a high dose exhibited shorter lifespan, but dose means very high dose. But they accounted only a small fraction of all Japanese residents. There are some few stories. One person is called Mr. Sutomu Yamaguchi. He's known as the unhappiest man in the world because when he was living in Hiroshima, the first atom bomb dropped. Then he moved to Nagasaki along with his 70 people. The second bomb was dropped. All died and he survived. And he died at the age of 93. Another guy called Sunao Suboi, he was the survivor of the Hiroshima bombing. He was just staying 1.2 kilometers from the epicenter during the bombing. And he is 93 in 2018. I don't know, maybe he's still living today. Shigeki Mori, he was just 8 years old, 2.5 kilometers from the epicenter, and he was blown away because of the atom bomb, the pressure wave of the atom bomb. And he was born in 1937, and he has lived longer than most Japanese men could do. This is picture most of you have seen. This is called the black rain. How it happened? Because when the atom bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, a lot of water evaporated and they created this mushroom cloud. And after 20 to 30 minutes, it rained all over Japan. It's just not Hiroshima and Nagasaki because the cloud spread almost everywhere in Japan. This is called as the black rain because the radioactive products moved along with the vapor and started raining everywhere. So black rain could have contaminated most of the Japanese, not just Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the issue was that when America conducted the simulation test in Nevada desert, they could not create this type of mushroom cloud or black rain. So the issue is the claims that a few people in Japanese, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were only exposed to radiation and their health effects is not correct. May I request all of you to come and sit here rather than standing there. If you don't mind, it's a beautiful story and it's for your subject only. In fact, all of that we are hearing transgenerational effects in the sense that what the father gets or parents get, it goes to the next offspring. This is what in the mind of most people in the world, if the people who are exposed to radiation and they get cancer, it will move to the next generation, to the next generation, and to the next generation. But I have given a reference here, the survivors of atom bombs in Japan. It was found that children of people who were exposed to atom bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had no indication of any deleterious health effects even after 62 years. Hence, the common public perception of the transgenerational effects of radiation is not correct. Now, come to the Cold War. You know, during the Cold War, the United States, UK, France, Russia were developing thousands of nuclear weapons, not 10 or 100. thousands. And there are several thousand scientific community, researchers, and soldiers who are involved, both for production and testing qualification. What happened to those people? Have they all died because they were exposed to radiation? This is the story for that. You look at the United Kingdom during 1950s and 60s, the people who were exposed to this so that no discernible impacts on mortality or the probability of developing cancer or any other fatalities, even with 22,347 data were taken, people who are directly exposed as compared to normal Britishers. Even during a subsequent follow-up of 7 years, participants' death rates for all causes like leukemia, multiple myeloma were lower than expected based on national rates, and they were also lower than those who were in controls. Even Australians who took part in the British nuclear experiments in Australia did not show any evidence of increased all-cause mortality. Additionally, no correlation could be found between radiation exposure and any cancer or excess cancer deaths, as well as with all-cause cancer incident or mortality. In United States, Operation Plum Bomb, this is basically which I was telling the Nevada tests, and there so many people were involved in the test. It was found that the people who were exposed for this test, they had a lower mortality rate than the general US population and were sufficiently healthy 53 years after the exposure. In Russia, Semipalatinsk is the place where roughly 20,000 cohorts were taken who were directly working for the nuclear program, including the tests. And they were exposed to a huge value of radiation, 20 millisievert to 4,000 millisievert. And it was found that no significant dose-response connection for any cardiovascular illness, heart disease, or stroke could be found. Some problem. Yeah. Now I'll come to the 3 nuclear power plant accident which has happened in the world so far. The first accident occurred in 1979 in the United States, the 3 Mile Island accident. And in that, no more than 50% of the nuclear fuel got melted and the fission products came out. But because the reactor has containment, only 0.01% of the radioactive fission products could leak. And it was estimated that the dose could be something between 10 to 70 curies, which was released from the reactor. There were no adverse health effects from the accident. However, the governor of Pennsylvania, he was scared. Almost 1,44,000 people were evacuated, those who were living in 10 miles area. And what happened to these 1,44,000 people who were exposed to something like 10 to 70 curie of the radiation? It was so that the rate of cancer in and around that area is insignificant. In spite of that, the public fear still lingers in United States. Now come to Chernobyl. This is the world's worst nuclear reactor accident, which happened in 1986. And the amount of release was much more than the Hiroshima atom bomb or Hiroshima-Nagasaki atom bomb. What happened in Chernobyl? There is a beautiful story. I think its computer is lagging. So, as you all know, the number of immediate deaths were very small, but the administration was scared and forcibly relocated roughly 1,16,000 people, local population, without warning. So what happened to them? See, out of these people who were evacuated, there are people who are old and they have already pre-existing diseases. The moment you evacuate such people, there is panic because of the social dislocation. And those guys who are already having other issues, normally they die. And that is why the deaths were much larger in the Chernobyl accident, not because of radiation, but mostly because of the panic. How much radiation the public received in Chernobyl? It's a beautiful table I have shown there. The maximum dose the public received in Chernobyl was 100 millisievert. If you recall, the Japanese atomic bomb survivor, I said, even after 200 millisievert dose, the lifespan of the exposed people were longer and their death rates due to cancer were much smaller. So here, the maximum dose which the public received was hardly 100 millisievert. There is a beautiful BBC documentary in 2006. What it says, those who have visited the site in Chernobyl have reported surprise. Instead of the wasteland they had expected, they found that wildlife is surviving and in some cases thriving in spite of the high radiation levels. The flora and fauna was found to shine. Now there are some statistical studies. When this Chernobyl accident happened, the former USSR government deployed 134 firefighters. Out of that, 28 died because of radiation sickness and subsequent diseases in the first 4 months. The other 106 people, they recovered, but 19 of them died in the next 20 years. And these 19 might not be the victims of radiation because the death percentage in USSR was 1%. And if you say 106 into 1% itself is 21, and that is more than 19. During 1991 to 2005, more than 6,000 thyroid cases, cancer cases were reported, of which most were attributable to drinking contaminated milk with iodine 131, and 15% died up to 2005. So most thyroid cases here were found to be benign papillary thyroid cancer. Had it been malignant one, it is expected that out of 6,000, 2,000 to 3,000 people would have died. The thyroid is a radiation insensitive organ. Its latent period is not fixed, but seems to be around 10 years or more. And in Chernobyl area, already there was a high increase in cancer incident, especially in the youngs, much before the Chernobyl accident had occurred. This is maybe a few months back, this report has come that Chernobyl's mutant wolves appear to have developed resistant to cancer. This is just maybe 3 to 4 months back. This study report has come. What it says, you know, the area which was contaminated, which is roughly 1,000 square kilometer, this was an abandoned area. This we say Chernobyl exclusion zone, where public, the human beings were not allowed to live. But the wildlife was living. So one of the doctor, Dr. Kara Lava, an evolutionary biologist and ecotoxicologist at Princeton University in the United States, she was studying how the Chernobyl wolves could survive despite generation of exposure to high radiation levels. And she and her team, they visited the Chernobyl exclusion zone in 2014 and put radio collars on the wolves so that their movements could be monitored. And the researchers discovered that Chernobyl wolves might be exposed to radiation levels 11.28 millirem of radiation every day for their entire lives, which is more than 6 times the legally allowed dose to human. And Dr. Lowe found that the wolves have altered human systems similar to cancer patients undergoing radiation treatment. But more significantly, she also identified specific parts of the animal's genetic information that seemed resilient to increased cancer risk. I will come to Fukushima, which happened in 2011. What has happened to that area? The Fukushima, as you know, occurred in 2011. 3 on-site workers died following the earthquake and tsunami, and several more was injured. Not a single fatality has happened in Fukushima accident because of the radiation exposure. 7,800 workers who were deployed received an average dose of only 7.7 millisievert. 30 had doses more than 100 millisievert, and this might have later exceeded to 200 50 millisievert if you consider the internal doses into account. More than 200,000 inhabitants from the vicinity of the site and affected areas were forced to evacuate. And there are nearly 600 non-radiological deaths because of this extra aggravation and the mental torture of the evacuation. And these guys might have already some chronic illness, and that's why they died. The mortality risk is a very interesting thing. There are some people who stayed back in Fukushima. They didn't move along with the 116,000 people. What the results showed? The mortality risk of residents in nursing homes evacuated after the Fukushima accident was 2.7 times more than those who stayed back. And the doses which the people received, almost 4,21,000 residents in the past 4 months, was 62% getting less than 1 millisievert, 94% less than 2 millisievert, and 99, almost large fraction of people who received very mild dose of less than 3 millisievert. Other estimated doses in 3 areas of the Fukushima were between 0.6 to 2.3 millisievert per year in Tamura city, 1.1 to 5.5 millisievert per year in a Kawachi village, and 3.8 to 17 millisievert per year in a Litet village. But when the dose was just 1 millisievert, the Japanese government was scared and asked the people to evacuate. So what does the 3 major accidents show? In the history of the civilian nuclear power plant accident, the dose which public receive because of the nuclear plant accident is very small. It's hardly a few millisievert. Please understand. So the additional risk due to low dose radiation on human life is almost negligible. The primary risk is basically the company is losing a nuclear power plant is a huge business loss for him. On the other hand, the biggest factor today is the psychological risk. When this Chernobyl accident happened, even far away place like Greece, almost 2,000 women went for abortion, thinking that their children may get cancer. These have, I'll say that, has caused more risk, psychological risk in the public than what radiation could do. There is a beautiful story here. Overdiagnosis of the cancer incidences. Diagnostic and health screening services differ between clean and dirty places, and variations in incident and mortality may not actually reflect disparities in health, but rather be the product of systematic bias brought on by the screening effect. For instance, in South Korea, the apparent incident increased by 15 times following the installation of screening measures in 2000. In the post-Soviet countries, because of the economic slump that followed the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, that led to the collapse of the healthcare system and dramatic rise in mortality rates, even in the far east of Russia, which evidently was not touched by the Chernobyl accident that saw a greater increase in mortality. In Fukushima analysis, an alarming 30-fold increase in thyroid cancer incident was discovered following widespread screening of the exposed children and teenagers using cutting-edge ultra-sensitive sonographic technology. However, sample screening of infants who were not exposed using the same tools and protocol also produced an increase of 10 to 60 times more cancer cases. Probably most of us have got cancer. We don't know because we have never been screened. Now, there are some instances, beautiful stories I'm going to tell. Taipei, you know, is the capital of Taiwan. And its apartments were made, 1,700 apartments were made, and in which contaminated cobalt-60 was present in this apartment, especially on the steel structures, and more than 10,000 people were living in that apartment, and they were not knowing they are living in contaminated houses, radioactive houses. Almost after 9 to 20 years after they lived, it was detected that these guys are living like us sitting here in cobalt-60 contaminated houses. And the dose they received was not small, of the order of 400 millisievert. What has happened to them? It was found that the cancer deaths were reduced by about 3% of these guys than the unexposed Taipei city people. You know, our Kerala, there is a place called Karungapalli, which houses all our thorium, monazite. And the background radiation level is very high, of the order of 70 milligram per year. And almost 385,000 people were taken for study. And it was found that they don't have any excess cancer risk because of living in this area as compared to normal Keralites. The Goiânia accident occurred on September 13, 1987 in Brazil after a forgotten radiotherapy source was stolen from an abandoned hospital. And IAEA names it the worst radiological accident which has happened so far. About 112,000 people were examined for the radioactive contamination, and 249 of them were found to be highly contaminated. But only 4 exposed died, not because of cancer, but due to acute radiation syndrome. In the early 1900s, radioactive luminous paint used to be used to make figures on the faces for making visible in the dark. Even some of you might be using those days, watches in which such radioactive paint used to be used so that you can see your, clock time in the dark. The workers who were employed to paint these dials, they were all contaminated. The alpha-emitting radium accumulated in the bones, which is anticipated to increase the chance of developing bone cancer. So about 1,339 workers were taken, and they had accumulated doses of no less than 10 gray, which is a huge number, but not a single case of bone cancer was reported. Ramsar is a village in Iran. It has a very high level natural radiation area because of the contamination of radium-226 and its decay products. There are hot springs, and this was highly contaminated by this, and the background radiation was huge, 146 kilobecquerel per meter cube, and that resulted in internal doses of 2.5 to 72 millisievert. So what was found? Neither the mortality rates nor cancer incidence had any difference compared to normal Iranian people. In China, there is a place called Yangjiang, and about 31,000 people were taken from that area because they were all exposed to radiation. And what it was found, the overall mortality study did not find any excess cancer risk from exposure due to gamma radiation. The mortality due to non-cancer diseases was not having any relation to radiation dose. The mortality due to infectious diseases, including tuberculosis, decreased significantly with these people than those who were not exposed. Dr. Don Wills once engaged in extraction of radium from uranium ore for 16 months from 1947. And he had accumulated radium of the order of 25 times more than the legal maximum amount of radiation, radon, which he should do. And one might assume that he was seriously contaminated. 65 years later, he says, I am healthy. Ian Souther, he used to play in uranium mines near Sault Ste in Canada as a kid collecting radioactive samples. Even he slept with radioactive rocks under his pillow and on the night table up to 1960. In 2011, he called all his childhood friends who had played in that uranium mines, and they were told they are going to get problems later in their life. Ian found all of them healthy, none had cancer. The mud pack was effective in removing arthritis and plantar wart pain. An allergy which his cat had developed had disappeared because of that. Leslie Corrish used to wear a uranium stone necklace from Nighthawk Minerals for 5 years. And what he claims, since then, he never had cold or upper respiratory tract infection. And he says, I firmly believe that if everyone wears one of these uranium necklace, we'll have a significant healthier society. In 1982, Locke was the first to conclude that low-dose radiation benefited animal growth and development, health and longevity. Even he recommends construction of meeting rooms like this next to a nuclear power plant, having a dose rate of at least 1 milligram per day, and use of monazite for radon rooms used for therapy and prevention. This is the most beautiful slide. Buttner, he travels on behalf of National Geography around the world to find the blue zone in the sense where the people in the world live the longest. This is big question, where people in the world live the longest. And he found there is an island called Ikaria, located 30 miles from the coast of Turkey, and the average lifespan of the siblings was 90 plus. And why they live so longer? He finds that one of the primary reasons the islanders live and bathe in an environment high in radon and radium. Now, what are the biological effects of low-dose radiation? Sokolov first reported on pain relief in patients with arthritis using X-rays. External beam X-rays were used in 1899 for successful treatment of superficial tumors. 1911, Poussey described cell stimulation and the successful treatment of some chronic inflammatory conditions. During 1930s, wide variety of inflammatory and infectious diseases were successfully treated by X-rays and radium gamma rays in the dose of 0.5 to 2 gray. Simple calculations show that little or no morbidity and an annual saving of millions of lives in the world if low-dose radiation sensitive. that include arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, neuralgia, spondylitis, bursitis, osteoporosis, asthma, diabetes, you name any disease. I'm not a doctor, but I was so happy that almost all diseases used to get cured by low dose radiation. Even high radiation doses used to be given to control bone pain from cancer, 8 grades used to be given, and nerve pain from tic duralyrex or trigeminal neuralgia, 75 gray used to be given. Prior to Second World War, X-rays were used successfully to treat almost all infections. There was 66% decrease in the death rates from infection and parasitic diseases in exposed workers at the Savannah River plant when compared with the unexposed controls within the same area. Over 115 years ago, physicians used to give X-rays to treat infections associated with gas gangrene, pneumonia, bronchitis, tuberculosis, and so many, diphtheria, ulcerative dermatitis, otis media. Fluid-injected cholera, tuberculosis, diphtheria, or typhus microorganisms in 5 cc saline under the skin of both ears of rabbits were found that the ear exposed to uranium rays had no inflammation. Lotted showed the attenuation of tuberculosis infection by Röntgen rays in guinea pigs. X-rays was to treat impaired hearing loss related to throat inflammation, lymphoid tissue growth in nasopharynx. X-ray therapy was used successfully to treat bacterial pneumonia during the first half of the 20th century. Periodontal disease caused mostly by inflammation, ulceration of gingival tissues from anaerobic bacteria was successfully treated by low-dose radiation, 10 cumulative gray per day. Low-dose radiation was found to accelerate wound healing by up to 50% based on X-ray therapy. Low-dose radiation stimulates the immune system, which can destroy precancerous cells, cancer cells, and tumor metastasis. There is evidence indication that even low-dose radiation could cure HIV/AIDS. Mice exposed to 1.5 milligram at 5 to 12 days following infection with the friend virus, a type of AIDS virus, recovered, while those who were not exposed, who were in the control, died within 40 days. Mice infected with retrovirus family, member of friend leukemia virus, which also includes HIV-1, are protected by radiation-induced adaptation in immune cells. There is strong evidence that HIV/AIDS could be successfully treated with low-dose radiation. Dale Rengeter initiated human trials which indicated that whole body radiation may be beneficial in treating HIV/AIDS. Now come to the cardiovascular diseases, how low-dose radiation can help. Typical cardiac patient exposure is similar to giving 50 chest X-rays per person per year, and most dose is from CT, coronary intervention, cardiac electrophysiology, nuclear cardiology, and they deliver huge. Huge means almost 750 chest X-rays. No unexpected risk of cancer was associated in staff working in cardiac catheterization laboratories who had received a median cumulative radiation dose of 36 milligram. So there is a good way to reduce heart damage is to give a low conditioning dose of 150 milligram per day. Low dose cumulative radiation less than 500 milligram appear to be safe with kidney, cardiovascular system, even with abnormal lipid profiles and diabetes. There was no statistically significant effects of cardiovascular disease in humans if given cumulative dose of less than 500 milligram and at doses less than 10 milligram per day. Diabetic mice given total body of 50 milligram every day, every other day for 4 weeks, or 25, 50 or 75 milligram for 4 to 8 weeks significantly reduced inflammation, insulin resistance and lipid profiles as well as preventing nephropathy. Whole body low dose radiation at 12.5 milligram every other day for 8 weeks appeared the optimal schedule and dose for protecting the kidney from the effects of diabetes. And let me tell you, the Chinese have published more than 100 journal papers. What is the beneficial effect of low dose radiation on immune system, tumor cells, diabetes, and stochastic effects? I did not cover that because of the time. Even come to the medical occupational exposure. My daughter is also, she is doing MD in radiology. She always says that, Dad, whatever you sing, they're all false. Because we are told in the class by my professors, you should be careful, extremely careful. Otherwise, there is big risk of getting cancer. So this is what I spoke, even though there are hundreds proofs, the medical fraternity itself is putting question, even though there is not a single journal paper which will be showing you have got this dose and you have got cancer. But this is what is there in the mind. Okay, let's look at medical occupational exposure. Elevated leukemia mortality rates were found. Radiologic technologists, mainly radiologists, who worked before 1950. Why? They were exposed to huge radiation those days. 30,000 millisievert per year in 1902. Excess mortality vanished 1920, after 1920, as the first dose limit of 0.2 rad per day, which is 500 millisievert per year, was put into place. For radiologists, after 1940, the cancer mortality has drastically reduced. The standard mortality rates in the United States were found to be 24% lower for all-cause mortality and 18% lower for cancer mortality in radiologists than overall US population. This is the today's statistics. I don't know if my daughter is listening, she should learn that the 4% lower in cancer cases of radiologists as compared to normal US population today. No correlation was found between prolonged low to moderate radiation exposures, even up to 12 milligram range, and malignant tumor mortality in US radiologic technologists. Male and female physicians exposed to radiation had 20% lower cancer and total mortality rates than psychiatrists. Okay, I didn't want to cover more and more. Question is, having said so beautiful stories, you tell any disease radiation can cure. Bigger question is, why people are afraid of radiation? When people think about nuclear, they never think all that I have been speaking in the last 35, 40 minutes, right? They only think about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and then radiation, cancer, and death. The public's fear or association of cancer with radiation. Cancer means it is because of radiation. All of you are working for cancer. You may believe or find that probably 99 patients who are coming here, they are hardly exposed to radiation. But it is still in the belief of a common man, if radiation is given, you are getting cancer. It may be emphasized that the public paradigm that nuclear radiation is carcinogen is a political, scientific misinterpretation and cherry picking than the actual science. I'll tell you how in the next few slides. In particular, governments created this fear of radiation as an effective weapon during the Cold War, and what it ultimately resulted in collateral damage to public morale about radiation. Who is the culprit behind this? There is a first I will tell a theory, and then I'll tell you the man who made this theory. The root cause of fear is the concept of linear no threshold theory called LNT in radiation. What does it mean? That biological damage is proportional to the radiation dose. In the sense, zero radiation dose, you will never get cancer. And as the dose increases, the risk due to cancer increases linearly. Perhaps this is the most misrepresented science presented as a fact, despite thousands of examples or evidences which is presented before. Who is the man behind that? The man behind this is Muller, a German scientist. How this story developed. After the discovery of X-ray induced mutations, two scientists, Olson and Lewis, they proposed that cosmic terrestrial radiation induced mutations provide the principal mechanism of the driving force of the evolution. And for this concept to be general, they adopted a linear no dose, LNT dose relationship was assumed with genetic damage proportional to the energy observed. And subsequently, studies by Muller suggested a linear dose relationship for ionizing induced radiation also, and that supporting the evolutionary hypothesis. The LNT concept was later generalized even to chemical carcinogen risk assessment and used by public, health, and regulatory agencies worldwide. What Muller did? Muller tried to plot the radiation dose in the x-axis and y-axis the excessive relative risk of solid cancer from the data of the Japanese survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. So what nicely if you see x-axis radiation dose, y-axis is the excess relative risk of the cancer. All the data he tried to put, and then he found a lot of data is not falling in the straight line. So those data which was not falling in the straight line, he removed. And those which was putting close to a straight line, that he did, right? And if you look at that right-hand side graph, if you see below zero, there is some risk is there. That means negative risk. Up to almost 0.2 gray is lagvag 200 millisievert. The risk was found to below zero or negative. This data he tried to suppress. And this is what I wanted to say, excess relative risk due to cancer at lower doses, which was not falling on the straight line, he removed. And that is what everybody knew, that the linear no threshold theory is not applicable, but Muller propagated his theory. So even though many others did not maintain significant support for this theory, Muller and other leaders of the radiation genetics community became strong advocates of this model for genome mutations and the occurrence of cancer. The US National Academy of Science Beer 1 Committee Genetics Panel recommended this model, which all governments and regulatory bodies accepted worldwide. The National Academy of Science Genetic Panel thus committed scientific misconduct by publishing in the journal Science its doctored estimates of human genetic risk to radiation exposures. Other advocates of this theory also relied on falsified data related to thinking that cancer may develop at a subsequent date. Today you are exposed to radiation, maybe after 10 years you may develop cancer. It's called the delayed cancer cases. Based on the linear extrapolation and statistics, using the cancer data of the atom bomb survivors who received an instantaneous exposure in the high dose of 1 to 10 gray or 100 to 1000 rad, the 1 gray was dragged to zero and a straight line was made. What does this model ignore? Low dose radiation have proven to improve the health of the people that we have seen. Hundreds of proofs I showed. High dose radiation is dangerous, we always accept. But every radiation dose is danger is false. Once Paracelsus, a physician and botanist, famously said, "Poison is in everything and nothing is without a poison. The dose makes it a poison or a medicine." The down below you can see the wind strength versus the deformation of a structure. If you say zero velocity of the wind, the structure stands vertical. As the wind moves, the structure deformation is proportionately related. We say it is a scientific misinterpretation or scientific misconduct, because there is a threshold strength above which only the structure goes for deformation. Muller received Nobel Prize in 1946 for showing that mutations in fruit flies increased in direct proportion to the dose of X-rays. For that, what he conducted tests at very high dose, 1000 to 4000 R. And to induce mutation, what he employed almost 2 lakh times more dose than the background radiation. Few years later, Stern, 1948-49, he found that there is a threshold dose, 500 milligray. Only if the dose is more than that, it can create mutation. That too, if it is continuously given for 21 days. That means results were dose rate dependent. In this process, Muller ignored and withheld the data that showed he was wrong. Muller knew prior to his Nobel lecture that data of Kaspareri and Stern and Uphoff and Stern had demonstrated already a threshold of 50 R for mutation in fruit flies. And that too, it was a dose rate dependent. Even there were already studies which showed that flower beetles, mosquitoes, crickets, curdling moth, tsetse fly, house fly, fruit flies, they all experience enhanced lifespans of 20 to 60% if they are given to an exposure of 1 to 40,000 R. Even exposure at egg and larva stages are found to increase longevity in insects at most lower doses, typically 10 to 100 R. More recent studies in fruit flies showed that X and gamma rays doses as low as 200 milligray to X significantly increase adult fly longevity. So what he decepted? The Rockefeller Foundation sponsored fruit fly studies by Muller, and in 1956 awarded grants, huge grant, $991,000 for genetic studies. Muller's actions was incredibly important because the world came to know that if mutagenesis from ionizing radiation is true for fruit flies, then it is also true for cancer in humans. So Muller made deceptive statements in an attempt to promote the acceptance of his theory, linear no threshold assumption for risk assessment from ionizing radiation. Muller also wanted to exaggerate the health risk from low-level radiation because he was opposed to above-ground nuclear weapon testing. And these are the 4 bright examples how low-dose radiation are so much important for life. If the dose, if you see, the risks are all negative. For example, the leftmost one, the reduced or reduction of lifespan, it can increase by 10%, you can say 5 to 10%, if the dose is given less than 10 milligram per day. Same thing also you look at the deaths per 1,000 people. If the dose is less than, if the I think the previous slide I have to go. Yeah. So deaths per 1,000 even was reduced significantly if the dose was found to be less than almost 25 to 50 millisievert. Same thing was also found, the leukemia cases for patients also that had a decrease if the dose was less than 0.1 sievert. So what is the impact of the linear no threshold? Every regulatory agency in the world today, except the France, base their policies on linear no threshold theory, in spite of massive published scientific data to demonstrate a threshold and the beneficial effects of low dose radiation. So the LNT doesn't address the low dose radiation hormesis, but only gives a mathematical treatment with the assumption that low dose ionizing radiation has proportionate health effects due to cancer that cost enormous resources in money and the quality and quantity of lives. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines phobia as an exaggerated, inexplicable, and illogical fear, and the result of fear is anxiety and avoidance. The LNT has a wide-ranging impact on radiology, nuclear power, dirty bombs, nuclear waste disposal, food irradiation, home radon, and diagnostic and nuclear medicine. The societal cost of radiophobia and fear-mongering is exorbitant, and those that continue to promote it stands the most to gain and just follow the money. The cost of implementation and carrying out radiation regulation doesn't improve plant safety or personal health. Rather, it actually costs tens of thousands of lives every year. You know, those who could have survived, we have killed them. The politics started here. The oil power, this is what they started evaluating the effects of ionizing radiation. The Standard Oil Company was founded by John Rockefeller in 1870, who later established the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. The oil industry realized the massive energy potential of nuclear, so they were afraid. The Republican Party had a close relationship with the oil industry, and Nelson Rockefeller was appointed as an important heir to President Eisenhower. Mueller, in turn, had close ties with this foundation. In 1954, the foundation chose to finance a large project to evaluate effects of ionizing radiation. The foundation asked the US National Academy of Sciences to organize the program, which was conducted under the auspices of National Academy of Science President Bronk of Rockefeller University, who is also an RF trustee. The genetic panels of the National Academy of Science Biological Effects of Atomic Radiation Committee was established in 1954, and this was chaired by Weber, who is a mathematician, not a biologist, and he was the director of the foundation. So there was a discussion. No significant discussion happened because the director is a mathematician, Mueller was a member, oil company was founding, who were against nuclear. The genetic panel recommended this linear no threshold theory on June 12, 1956. Before this, the limit dose to a nuclear worker was 500 milligram per year, and this was reduced to 0. The next day, the front page of New York Times, owned by the same trustee, reported that radiation is dangerous, and other media followed the suit. The decision was cast, and reasonably so, as an ideologically motivated choice based on deliberate falsification and fabrication of the research records. After that, the ICRP came, the International Commission for Radiation Protection. So they imposed the doses. That's what all of us are following. Occupational exposure should be 20 millisievert per year. Averaged over 5 years is 100 millisievert in 5 years, with a maximum of 50 millisievert in any 1 year. And for the public, 1 millisievert per year. And we said up to 200 millisievert, your health is going to improve. Longevity is more, chances of dying because of cancer was lesser, and that was made to 1. And what is the implication on nuclear power plant? Background radiation in India average 2.4 millisievert per year, and if you want to make a nuclear power plant, it has to be 1 millisievert per year. And actually, in nuclear power plants, we put so much barriers, so many barriers, the dose is close to 0 millisievert per year. And if you're going for a heart CT scan, you get almost 15 millisievert, full body CT scan 10 millisievert, and so on. X-ray close to 1 millisievert, and so on. If you go for an X-ray, the doctor puts a red light. You ask the doctor why a red light is given, doesn't have an answer. Same thing is everywhere. Look at the radiation doses which is coming to the public in all our nuclear power plants. It's microsievert per year. And at what cost? You have to create barriers after barriers after barriers so that radiation doesn't leak and the electricity cost goes up. And the public, we say, nuclear is expensive, right? I don't know. This is my last slide. The biggest question, are we radiation deficient today? Many thousand years ago, the human beings used to live in animals and birds in forest. Once there was fire in the forest. The heat of the fire, the birds and animals could not bear, they all flew away. The human beings could realize the fire contains heat, and that's how the evolution has happened. Nuclear radiation has a lot of potential, not only for the health, but to take this century, the habitats of this century, to a much, much developed society with almost minimal risk to health, agriculture, food, water, whatever we define. Time has come to think differently. It's my appeal to all the doctors here, to all the experts here, think that radiation, low dose radiation has a lot of benefit, not cancer and death. Thank you.
We have exceeded time to a great extent, but that was a very interesting information. Are there any questions? Maybe one or two questions? Yes, Rangarajan.
Sir, I will ask you only one question. Not that you have told something, something very new for us. I am a nuclear physician and I have been living around reactors ever since I was born. Okay. So one question is, now that you have all this information and you also are in a strategic position in Department of Atomic Energy, you have a choice in your career time, in
Thank you for your, I would say, they're very passionate questions. And what you said was also my dream, let me honestly declare before you. But it is a worm which has infected across the globe. And even though it's not that, as you rightly said, nowhere it is my personal opinion I have put. Every word in this presentation, if you just go to Google and open it, the same story will reveal. Question is, in fact, since you opened such a thing, I would just add it. Almost 3 years back, when this COVID was going on, I had a chance to discuss with the IAEA authorities that why not relook into this ICRP dose numbers. Is there any science behind this, or this has been imposed to the whole world? Of course, the IAEA authorities listened, but as you know, it's much more politically imposed than a science behind it. This is what we have been listening in the last 1 hour, few minutes talk. As you rightly said, yes, I'm in the driving seat, but country is 1.4 billion population, and 99.99% mind is already infected. So we have to educate each and every public, take it to the grassroots level. In fact, when I wrote this book, it's here. The first thing, Dr. Sinha, R.K. Sinha, he's also one author, he told me how to take it to the primary education. So that child, when he reads from start, and when he comes to the adulthood, he will tell his father, "Aapko malum nahi, you are telling wrong thing." I have read, low dose radiation is beneficial. Until and unless it goes to that level, the society will not change. This is my perception. Second thing, the other part you said, that having more reactors, more radioisotope is required, definitely. The country size is quite big, population is too much. More and more screening, this is what I said, you get more and more number of patients. So this needs to happen, and the department is working along with the minister on that. So everything cannot be discussed in a scientific lecture, as you know. But this part, what you said, definitely it should be done. Thank you for your suggestions.
I just have another comment. Besides the fear of cancer that is there in the lay public, the other important issue that many people have in their minds, and that actually is something that we always have to address, I'm a radiation oncologist, so is about the teratogenic effects of radiation, because that's what really scares people, and that scares even the radiation workers who fully know that that cannot be done, and we have the 20-day rule also. Despite that, people are very scared about the teratogenic effects of radiation, and that is something that we really need to allay, because even radiation workers just cannot come out of this, and they think that they're always at risk.
Yeah, this is precisely, I gave the example of my daughter in the similar sense. So when I wrote this book, because neither I have radiation experience, of course, Professor Badwe told me many big things about me, but I was basically a reactor engineer, let me honestly speak. When I wrote this book, I also had very similar ideas of yours. Why not to do research on every people? Let's talk about bone cancer, or let's talk about asthma, let's talk about diabetes, let's talk about abnormal lipid profile. Why not do research to find out what doses of radiation is required in a therapeutic way to cure that, which has not happened since after the atom bombs were made. So it is the time to relook into this. Then, of course, these things can be solved, which is nobody in the world is working on this because of this, poor dose limits, I'll say.
We have the low dose
If there are no further questions, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Nayak, for giving us the insights, and it was a pleasure having you here.